This time, Millwall, 1988-89, into the Lions' Den.
No, nay, never. No, nay, never, no more. 'Cause I'll stay a wild drover forever and more.
Hello and welcome to By Far the Greatest Team, a podcast in which fans attempt the impossible to rank once and for all who is the greatest football team of all time. My name's Graham Dunn, stating the case for Oxford United at every opportunity, and I know some of you will have been missing some of those Oxford United crowbar back over the last couple of podcasts or two. There is no danger of there not being this entire Millwall side being seen through the prism of Oxford United. So that will be my contribution to this pod. And joining me, as ever, our king of the numbers is Jamie Rooney.
Well, I need to kick off by sharing with you, when I think it was a podcast or two, an episode back where you shared your incredible journey from Las Vegas to Sunderland to watch your Oxford United, where you did reference Oxford United if you slipped your mind.
Oh, yes, I might have mentioned that.
I think we calculated you travelled around 9,500 kilometres to watch a second-tier game, which was highly commendable. Now, in the research of this Millwall team, not only can I give you regional TV, something that we like a bit, LWT, back in 1982-83, there was a TV show called The 6 O'Clock Show, hosted by Michael Aspel. You might remember that. And
yes, indeed.
Danny Baker, famous Millwall fan, did a segment on Millwall, a game where they're in Tier 3 with the danger of being relegated to Tier 4, and they had to beat Brentford at home, and they did. They won 1-0, and we might come on to that. And Danny Baker interviewed a few fans after the game, and one of them was an Aussie, and he'd come from Sydney, and he spoke to the guy, and he said, "Have you come all the way from Australia?" He goes, "Oh yeah, mate, I just said to the missus I fancied the game." And so he booked his flight on the Wednesday, he flew on the Thursday, he watched the game on the Saturday, and then he returned back to Australia. Now that's, my calculations, around 16,500 kilometres. So I think he's topped your 9,500 kilometres from Las Vegas.
Yeah, and the beautiful end to that story is that Tim Cahill went on to have a very successful career at Millwall before joining Everton from these beginnings. So we are doing Millwall. And this is a really entertaining one because we have, since this new season, we have actually, we've done the great Uruguay team, we've done Alfredo Di Stefano, his Real Madrid. So we have actually touched some true all-time greats. We might struggle to get to that with this Millwall side, but it's a very entertaining one. And what I like about this, it almost as if we planned it. Last week, we did the indomitable Lions for Cameroon. And this week we are doing, well, we can work out our own adjective at the end of this episode, but we are doing the Lions, the original Lions, maybe, of Millwall. And I'm delighted, joining us on our little stroll down cold blow memory lane, it's Stuart Burgess.
Hi, Graham. Thank you. Hi, Jamie. Great to be back. Yeah, very much a stroll down memory lane for me. Funnily enough, the match you mentioned there, Jamie, the Millwall Brentford game. I was at that game. 1-0 secured our place in the third tier. I had travelled but a few miles from my grandmother's house in Camberwell, but very much worth the trip to see us beat Brentford. And Terry Hurlock was playing for Brentford that day, if I remember rightly. Of whom maybe more later. I don't want to give anything away, but
because Stu, you had the slightly strange thing of growing up having those experiences of having half the family backing probably everyone's favourite London team, and then the rest of the family supporting, as the song goes, the team that no one in London likes.
Yeah. I can't remember if I touched on this with you guys before, but my dad's family, very much Millwall fans, all from Camberwell area. My mum's family, slightly more genteel, from Willesden, obviously the upmarket Willesden. But my mum's family were all Fulham supporters, so I kind of foot in both camps. As a younger man, I was attracted by the obvious glamour of Cold Blow Lane and used to attend matches there quite regularly. But in my more advanced years, the gentler climes of Craven Cottage on the banks of the River Thames have been my more frequent place of homage. But very, very much a supporter of both sides, really.
We're going to focus on the 1988-89 season, which is, so Millwall have they're a very established club. They've, in the whole time I've been following football, they've pretty much always been in the top two divisions of some kind or another. But actually, they have mostly been in the second tier. It hadn't really occurred to me that this season was their first appearance in the top tier, and it sort of comes from nowhere.
Yeah. As you say, it was they'd never been in the top flight prior to 88, 89. They'd had a famous season in 71, 72 where they'd come within a whisker of getting promoted, and after their final game, they were actually in second place. But back in those days, the fixtures didn't all end on the same day, and so Birmingham had a remaining game away. I think it was away to Leyton Orient, and Birmingham won that, thereby relegating Millwall to third place. But and they hadn't really kind of threatened to get anywhere near the top flight since the early 70s, and indeed, sort of a season before the promotion season, there was no reason to suspect anything was going to happen because Millwall had finished 17th in the second tier, avoiding the relegation playoff, which there used to be relegation playoff back in those days, avoiding that by 3 points. So kind of the summer prior to the promotion season, there were very little expectations on the terraces of the Den.
There'd been a sort of a period of relative success with under George Graham before then, but then I guess they'd been moving them up the league, and I think there was a cups. I think when they were second winners of, I don't even know what the cup was called at the time, but it's the Johnson's paint base EFL thing now.
Yeah. I can't think what it was called. I think actually it might even have been called the Associate Members Cup. I don't think there was even a sponsor,
it could have been
back then. But yeah, George Graham, he kind of cut his teeth at Millwall, really, and he got them promoted from Division 3, as was in, I think, what that would have been 85, 86. And then stayed for another season, and then kind of unsurprisingly, given the success he had at Millwall, Arsenal came in for him, and off he went. And with his departure, quite a few of the players that had brought Millwall up moved on from the club as well, including probably the most famous player of that team was John Fashanu, who went on obviously to play for Wimbledon and appear in I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. And Gladiators, wasn't he in Gladiators?
He was.
Yes,
He was a host of Gladiators.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the kind of the George Graham team had kind of dissipated, and there was a change of chairman at Millwall. Alan Thorne left, and Reg Burr came in. There was a sort, although they'd gone up, Millwall was never going to be a club that attracted a sugar daddy because there wasn't the potential there to make a lot of money, or as it was seen at the time. So it was kind of a question of just sort of plugging holes in the dike. And Red Burr came in, Graham had gone, and he appointed John Docherty as manager, which left most of the Millwall fans completely underwhelmed, as Docherty's previous managerial job a bit at Cambridge United about 3 years previously. And actually he replaced Ron Atkinson as the manager of Cambridge in the late 70s. So he'd been at Cambridge, and then he got the sack from there, and his last employment was assistant manager at Brentford. So, I think the Millwall faithful were slightly disenchanted with that, and the lack of investment meant that, say, the season before they got promoted, they finished 17th in Division 2. But Reg Burr at this point had a bit of an epiphany, and I think he kind of decided, well, I can either just keep plugging the holes, or I can just go for broke, throw some money at the club, and see if we can make something happen. So in that close season, they bought a number of players, including George Lawrence, who previously played for Oxford United, as I recall, Steve Wood, central defender, and probably most famously Kevin O'Callaghan and Tony Cascarino. And this was an investment of probably over £500,000, which back then was kind of not an insignificant amount of money. And it was a bit of a statement of intent, really. And so, hopes were slightly raised on the terraces that we might actually do something.
I mean, they were sort of big-ish signings in hindsight. George Lawrence, or Chicken George Lawrence, as he was known throughout his career. I'd have to go back and watch Roots to know whether that's acceptable to say anymore. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
It doesn't quite feel right. But Chicken George was what he was known as throughout. And he was had a hugely successful time at Oxford, although, as I will go on to explain, not I don't think, our best winger. But that's sacrilege. Our best played for both winger, but many people would disagree with that. And Steve Wood actually had a pretty underwhelming spell towards the end of the career at Oxford as well.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, and Kevin O'Callaghan, of course, Jamie, we know him from his Ipswich days and his acting efforts.
Yes, indeed, yeah.
The Escape to Victory, our favourite football documentaries. I like it time and time again.
And O'Callaghan had the pivotal role of being the original goalkeeper who had to have his arm broken so that Slice Sloan could take his place.
It always frustrated me that they chose an outfield player. I felt it should be a keeper.
Well, maybe the keepers failed the audition. I don't know.
Well, we know that Paul Cooper was there because he was a consultant, and we know that the reserve goalkeeper was there because he was playing for the Nazis. Do you remember what was his name again? Something.
Laurie Civil. Was it Laurie Civil?
Laurie Civil, yeah.
Laurie Civil. That's
a brilliant
fantastic.
shout.
That's great. That's brilliant. My memory's so bad. He was in goal for the Nazis. So Ipswich did have goalkeepers there, but clearly Kevin O'Callaghan was the one that chosen.
Wasn't Laurie Civil one of the great 1970s Union of Short Goalkeepers? He was about 5'10", wasn't he? And there was the Derby guy? Was it Les Green? Who, a very diminutive fella. There were quite a lot of them back in the 70s. I mean, now goalkeepers are about 6'6", aren't they?
John Burridge.
I don't think Paul Cooper was a big fella.
No, John Burridge wasn't very big, did he?
John Burridge. I don't know if I've told you this before. Bizarre story about him. He used to watch Match of the Day when he was able to, in his full kit and boots every Saturday night. He would put everything on. I can't remember. It was on a kind of a football focus thing or something years and years ago. And his poor dear wife was saying that he gets changed into his full kit and his football boots to sit down to watch Match of the Day. I mean, that's commitment, isn't it? That's fantastic commitment.
I actually saw John Burridge play. I saw him play in one of his 3 appearances for Aberdeen away to Rangers. It was my mate's stag do, and just doing the maths, he would have been 43 years old then. And he then subsequently went on to play. He then went on to play for about 15 other clubs after that. By the look of it, so
I was lucky enough to see one of the 2 games that Massimo Taibbi played for Manchester United.
That is good.
He was a very short-lived choice, wasn't he?
Yeah, he didn't last long.
I mean, you're right. John Burridge, after playing for Aberdeen, at what you would assume comfortably was the tail end of his career. I mean, he's played about 500 games before then. He goes on to about 20 more clubs.
Yeah. Manchester City amongst them.
Manchester City are real, yeah. That's a proper club. Plays 4 times for Man City. He must have been doing some bench warming or whatever, because he seems to join the series of clubs just to sit with no appearances. So, maybe he was just good for morale. Yeah. But this Millwall side don't sign John Burridge, who much changed everything. Probably the big Kevin O'Callaghan is obviously a super significant signing, but probably the most significant has to be Tony Cascarino.
Yeah, and I mean he went on to bigger things after Millwall, but we signed him from Gillingham for a fee of £200,000, And he'd been a prolific scorer kind of at lower level. And I think a couple of sort of top flight teams had sniffed around him, but maybe didn't fancy making the jump. But Millwall obviously did. And famously partnered him up front with Teddy Sheringham, who'd been in the team for the past couple of seasons, come up through the youth ranks and was, developing into a very tidy goal scorer. And it was kind of that partnership up front, along with, some other key positions slotting into place that really kind of drove that promotion season. Both of them comfortably in double figures at the end of it.
It could have been very different because Cascarino, I was reading, wasn't the first choice. The original first choice signing was Big Mick Quinn, who I think was opted to stay at Portsmouth. Which feels
that's a relief.
So
yeah, he was big in terms of rotund as much as anything else, wasn't he?
Yes,
Did he
definitely
go on
so.
to-
Definitely so.
Didn't he go on to strike up a brilliant partnership at Coventry City with Mickey Glynn? Quinn and Glynn.
Yeah.
Gin and Quinn? Was that right? I think
Gin
they...
and Quinn.
Yeah, Gin. Yeah,
It was
they had
Gin, wasn't it? Mickey Gin, yeah.
Mickey Glynn, yeah.
Glorious. So it could have been all different. But Cascarino history looks kindly on that signing, and I suppose it's quite interesting because all that while Sheringham was playing and was in that Millwall side, his career hadn't really taken off before Cascarino arrived either, had it?
No, I mean, I think he'd been a fairly regular starter in the season where they finished 17th, but once Cascarino came, that really kind of was what elevated Sheringham to obviously being a player with great potential and banging the goals in. And between the two of them, I haven't got the numbers, but I think they must have scored, around 40 odd between the two of them that season. And that really was what sort of drove that promotion over the line. And you had another sort of couple of things that kind of clicked. We mentioned Terry Hurlock earlier, but Hurlock was signed the season before the promotion season and slotted in alongside Les Briley, who'd been there a few years. And that was a real kind of engine room in the middle. I mean, kind of difficult to see too much creativity in those two, but I think diehard Millwall fans will always tell you that both of them were more than just cloggers, and I would tend to agree with that. Hurlock did look like the bass player from the Scorpions or something like that, didn't he? And the rumour is, though, I think this is unsubstantiated, that during his entire football career he still ran a post office in Walthamstow and would get up at 5 o'clock to sort out the papers for the paper boys. Now, that's probably an apocryphal story. Briley and Hurlock in the middle was a real engine room. And then they had O'Callaghan on one wing and Jimmy Carter on the other, who also, I think, went on to grace the Manor Ground at some point.
Very much so. Jimmy Carter, he had two loan spells with us. And the first loan spell, he was literally the best player, almost the best player I'd seen since the days of Joe Beecham, probably. He was he had an unbelievable spell. I was so excited when he rejoined us. Jimmy Carter had the most extraordinary. He has one of the most extraordinary careers because he does pretty well at Millwall. I mean, that's where he gets noticed. And then I'd forgotten he signs for Liverpool. He's there for sort of a year or so, or not even a year. Then gets picked up by Arsenal. He's there for 3. He barely plays for either of those clubs for about 4 years. Probably the best years of his career. Just whiling away in the reserves.
And then obviously the peak goes on to Oxford. So
very much so.
But the bizarre thing about Jimmy Carter is that you guys will know this, but he's one of the first ever British Asians to play in the top
Unbelievable.
flight.
It is unbelievable. I saw this and I had no idea. And I think it's mostly because Jimmy Carter, you can't find a more. If you wanted to come up with a I'll name a absolute journeyman English 1950s midfielder or footballer.
Yeah.
Jimmy Carter, absolutely spot on.
Yeah. But yeah, he's of Asian or Indian descent, isn't he? I think his
Indian,
father's
Indian,
Indian, and yeah, and
I think his father's name was Carter as well, and so he did carry his father's name. He was the second, in Premier League terms, the second British Asian to play in the Premier League, behind another one that you probably wouldn't expect to be British Asian, and that's Robert Rosario. But it was a matter of days. I think Rosario started on the weekend, and I think Carter played a couple of days later in the very first Premier League.
he was a great player, and I mean, very, silky winger, the traditional kind of step over, knock it down the line, outrun the fullback, and then pull it in. And when you got, Cascarino and Sheringham in the middle, they were knocking them in for fun, really.
The Cascarino and Sheringham combination is fantastic, though, isn't it? It's something you don't really see much in the modern game. You got your big, maybe an injustice to Cascarino here, but physical, tall, number 9 who can play as well. And you got Sheringham, who's just that incredible number 10 that kind of drifts in and out of spaces, reads the game so well, links play incredible, only need a single touch of the ball to make some magic happen. It's a fantastic partnership. It really is. And I think, Stuart, just to flavour your stats, I think it's in between 1987 and 1990, 3 seasons, I think they played 110 games together and scored 99 goals, which is a staggering contribution.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah, incredible. And kind of not far short of a goal a game between them. And they worked really well together. And, as you say, Cascarino wasn't just a target man, but similarly, Sheringham wasn't just an inside forward. They were both, he was a big fella as well, so they could actually play off each other. It wasn't just Sheringham playing off Cascarino. They could reverse roles a little bit. So when they went to the top flight, I think they took teams by surprise with that, because they had, it was a bit old school, but they had 2 decent wingers and 2 decent centre forwards and 2, engine room midfielders. And I think that the top flight teams maybe underestimate them, but they certainly struggled to sort of contain them, certainly for the first half of that season.
It is very unusual, actually, because when you're thinking about striker combinations, which you don't get a great deal of now, but there is traditionally the kind of little and large style. Your Toshak and Keegan, your kind of
Keegan.
your Phillips and Quinn, or this Toshak and Keegan, of course. But
Ailes and Flanagan from
Ailes and
Charlton.
Flanagan, yes,
Who I always thought were members of the ELO. If you look at them, they look very much like members of the ELO. And I checked this, and ELO never played a gig that clashed with the Charlton match, so it's still possible. But my favourite from that era was Bannister and Warboys. Do you remember them? Smash and Grab from Bristol Rovers. Alan Warboys and Bruce Bannister.
Oh, Bruce Bannister.
No, I'm a bit older than you guys. So I'm 60 now. I've got my bus pass. But Bristol, they scored a phenomenal amount of goals, and they were known as Smash and Grab. Alan Warboys was Smash because he was the big fella who would smash his way through. Bruce Bannister was Grab because he grabbed the opportunities created by Warboys. And but you don't get them like that now, do you? You don't get these striking partnerships.
No, I mean, it's very rare. You see
very
up front. It's a single number 9, or it's it's a line of 3. Really, is the shape of teams these days. But also, just going back to that, I think it's the same season, the 89-90 season, when Millwall had their second season in the about that period of time. There's a brilliant combination with Brighton Wright at Crystal Palace as well. So you've got this incredible right partner, and they were super exciting together. I mean, they were just fantastic. They were worth their admission fee every week watching Crystal Palace.
Yeah, and they didn't conform to the big bloke, little bloke type either, did they? They were both quite quick and wiry. And so I guess, like a few years later, Dwight York and Andy Cole at Man United, there was no target man there, was there? But they both kind of played off each other very, very effectively.
Yeah, it's incredible. These players just find this chemistry, this kind of language between them that just works. And They understand each other on and off the ball. They know where to run. They know when not to run. They know where to be. It's an incredible chemistry you get with these particular partnerships that just works.
You know, you've got the leading partnerships like Haaland and, Haaland, just Haaland.
He's a partnership on his own, Haaland, isn't he? Really.
Interestingly, Smash and Grab, they do come up as one of the original partnerships. This I think is quite interesting. I would definitely, I suppose what's quite interesting, you also at United, you have, this is one of the strange things about Sheringham, that actually he's been involved in, his career is so incredible. Actually, he has multiple partnerships and multiple places he's seen as a hero. And I think one of the things I was really interested about this particular story is actually Millwall is the team that he plays the most for over the longest period of time. And actually, if you talk to, Jamie, our South Coast fan, Teddy Sheringham's one of his favourite all-time Portsmouth players, and would have done like a year there,
really?
Almost everywhere he went. And so with Sheringham, obviously you have the Sheringham Cascarino thing, but you have Sheringham and Shearer for England. You have Sheringham and maybe Andy Cole for Man United.
They didn't like each other. They didn't get on. I don't even if they get on off the pitch nowadays. But yeah, there was still that chemistry. But I mean, Sheringham was there at the time. I mean, Sheringham is just a football player, I think, that makes other players play better. He just has that incredible ability. And he is one of the best English forwards I think we've seen, because he's a smart player. He's, almost his timing was right coming into the Premier League in the early 1990s. I think if we'd have seen a Teddy Sheringham playing in the 1970s, he probably might not have had as much success, because his physicality, he was physical, but his type of game may have not worked. So his timing was pretty right. But Sheringham just improved players around him. And Ferguson brought him in to replace Cantona. So, I mean, it's the biggest compliment, really.
This sounds a bit glib, but the pass that Sheringham played to Shearer in the 1996 Euros when we beat Holland sums him up, really, because he's shaped to shoot. 90% of forwards would have shot, and he just squared it to Shearer to give Shearer a very easy opportunity. And I thought that's kind of him, really. That was what he did. He was just very, as you say, Jamie, very, very good at making other players play well. Yeah,
he did that wonderful thing with dropping the shoulder, and I've seen it in his younger career playing in Millwall. In my research on coming into this one, it's there from early stage where he'll feint and drop his shoulder and then turn, and it just buys him that extra second or that split second, which allows him to just either set up an opportunity or put an opportunity away. And he had that right through his career, and I think that's what allowed him to play on for as long as possible. And then go on and be an absolute legend on The Masked Singer.
I only just picked that up. I thought you said I thought you said undermarked singer, and I thought
I thought so. I was trying to think. Did he get a spell in Portugal or something?
Yeah.
I lost track of the end of his career. I think what is quite interesting about the Shearer thing, and to Stu's point, is, especially in those early days of Millwall, the style was pretty direct, and it was definitely getting the ball down the wings. And what's interesting is, Sheringham in his later career probably still chipping in goals, was probably that second striker. But in each season, I think he's the top scorer. I think he outscores Cascarino in that promotion year. He gets 24 and Cascarino 23. He's more than pulling his weight as a goal scorer.
Yeah, absolutely. Sort of pulling back to the promotion season. And you mentioned in your intro or earlier, Graham, about they like putting a kind of run together. And at the end of that promotion season, last 13 games, they won 9 and drew 3, including a run of 7 consecutive victories. And I think in that period, Sheringham scored 8 and Cascarino scored 5. So phenomenal end to the season. And I think until sort of, February, March time, they'd not been in the top three. They'd been sort of in, 5th, 6th, 7th, but they hadn't been in the top three until March. And then they just put this tremendous run together and ended up winning the championship. And I think securing it with a game to go.
And I think it's just as well they secured it at the time. I was reading one story about because they don't they is it Hull or is it York? I think they
won 1-0 away to Hull, secured the championship. I was at Kempton Park that day.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah, wow.
Did you win there as well?
No, I had to phone. These are the days before, mobiles and so on, and so and for whatever reason, I don't think. Certainly, in the stadium, they weren't showing the telly. They were just showing the racing. So I had to phone my cousin from the stand at Kempton Park to find out the score. So, yeah, championship secure, 1 game to go. And I think as you were probably going to move on to the fact they lost the last game 4-1.
Yes. And
at home to Blackburn.
And I think there were a few drinks. There's a story I was reading about John Docherty had decided they probably shouldn't go out to the local nightclub up in Hull to celebrate their win,
right?
Their promotion bits fee. So he hired a room, I think, presumably at the hotel or something, where they went drinking, but in something that was perhaps an echo, maybe something that happens later in Teddy Sheringham's career. He does sneak out, and he's one of the people who makes it to a nightclub in Hull. Gets spotted, and apparently, again, how true this is, but the suggestion is that Docherty then made the 4 or 5 transgressors head back at 6 o'clock and make it down to a reserve game at lunchtime back in Millwall and play that one.
I went to the final home game, which was at home to Blackburn, so we'd already won the title, and it did appear that the team were suffering from a collective hangover because we got beaten 4-1, much to the joy of the home supporters, because Blackburn's victory meant that they pipped Crystal Palace to the last promotion place. So the playoff place, wasn't it? So that really was the icing on the cake for Millwall fans at the end of that season.
Yeah, Blackburn had skin in that game, where obviously Millwall didn't. They were quite happy to have their flip-flops on, ready to go and enjoy their summer before their first season in the top 5. It's also a strange time in English football. A strange time because there's no European football. Crowds are down. But it's also when the top tier was reducing from 22 teams to 20 teams, and it was in that midpoint. So there were 21 teams in the Division 1 top tier, and there were 23 teams in the Division 2. So every week a team would miss a game. So it makes only 2 teams got promoted automatically in first and second. And as you mentioned, Stu, there was this playoff between the teams in 3, 4, 5, and 6, which Blackburn got into on that win. But I think that makes Millwall's achievement even more outstanding. The fact that they've never been promoted before, but they win the league when it's probably a really tough time to do with 23 teams in it. And they go up into the Premier League. And I don't know, this is an opportunity for Graham to put in an Oxford United reference if he wanted to.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yes, so Millwall do replace Oxford United in the top tier. That is. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you for bringing that one up. That wasn't one of the facts.
By the way.
Yes, our glorious. I did. When I looked at the things, I might just go look and see how Millwall did again. Oh no, we got relegated by then, haven't we?
Yeah.
But it's fair to say that there's a lot of excitement around the promotion for Millwall, and actually. In terms of attendances, there's some kind of extraordinary stuff that starts happening in terms of the people going to the games. I don't think there would have been any huge optimism going into that next season that Millwall could really make a mark on that.
No, not. I mean, I guess you've got that sort of crest of a wave just come up. Everyone's feeling quite full of themselves. But if you actually look at the squad that came up, there was very little, if any, Premier League experience in there, or top flight experience. Sorry, this was pre-Premier League, wasn't it? We've not mentioned other players in the team, but Brian Horn, who was the goalkeeper, he'd come up through the youth system. Keith Stevens, right back, Alan Cleary centre back, both stalwarts at Millwall, both legends at Millwall, had also come up through the youth systems. We've already mentioned Sheringham, Terry Hurlock, Les Briley came from Brentford and Aldershot. Cascarino came from Gillingham. So the only players in the squad when we kind of achieved top flight status, the only two players, as far as I can make out, who previously played in the top flight were Kevin O'Callaghan and George Lawrence, who played at Southampton. So, not exactly coming in well equipped for it. It would seem John Docherty had never managed at that level. Frank McClintock was assistant manager. He'd played at that level, obviously for Arsenal with great success, but he'd never managed at that level either. So, kind of, I think just sort of staying up would have been the height of most people's ambitions, really. They did sign in the close season Ian Dawes from QPR, who was a fullback with quite a lot of top flight experience. That was Nicky Coleman, who was the left back the previous season that sustained an injury, so they kind of brought Dawes in for him. But pretty thin on the ground in terms of experience across the board. But they kind of hit the ground running and carried on where they left off at the end of the previous season, really.
The momentum that they go in with is incredible, and you're absolutely right. There's very little in terms of bulking the squad out. It's classic journeyman status at that stage for a lot of players who've been playing in slightly lower tier football or just been playing all their football in Millwall. But obviously the crest of the wave they ride, and they make just an astonishingly strong start.
They were top of the table after 6 games. Beat Derby, beat Charlton, beat Everton, beat QPR, drew with Villa, drew with Norwich. So 6 games in, Millwall is sitting top of the table. Cascarino had already scored 8 goals in the first 6 games. And, I think generally teams didn't... I think they genuinely took teams by surprise. I don't think, nowadays everyone does their homework, everyone researches the opposition. I think that was much less of a thing back in the day. And my assumption is they thought, Millwall, they've never been here before. They've got a team of untried players. And we, they shouldn't cause us too much problems, but they did. And so the twin strike force, Cascarino and Sheringham, I would wager a lot of top flight midfielders hadn't come across a player like Terry Hurlock very often in their previous careers, or certainly hadn't come across a player with that kind of hairstyle. So yeah, and they went the first 8 games of the season undefeated. And I did the maths on this. So if you roll the end of the promotion season and the first 8 games of the top flight season, they played 21, won 13, drawn 7, lost 1. So they'd taken 46 points from 21 games, and the only one they'd lost was the dead rubber to ensure that Palace missed out on the playoffs. So that's an impressive streak, isn't it?
That's absolutely incredible.
After 11 games, because they continue it, they do drop points to Middlesbrough. I'm sure Steve's got that there, where they lose 4-2. But then they go on and they recover well, and they don't lose again for 4 games. So after 11 games, Millwall, in their first season in the top flight, are sitting 4 in the league, behind Southampton in third, Arsenal in second, and Norwich City in top place. Now, there's a top 4 in the top tier of English football you don't get every Saturday.
Jeez, incredible.
Yeah.
And Cascarino and Sheringham, I think they scored. One of them scores in 10 of their first 11 games. It's just incredible.
I think it's probably Cascarino. Yeah.
Incredible run.
And you mentioned Norwich there, Jamie, and I think Norwich and Millwall were in the top 3. Were 2 of the top 3 teams pretty much up to about March. And I remember there was a televised match, which in the days when televised matches were still a new thing, which was Millwall at home to Norwich, and I think it was like 2nd v 3rd in the table, and it was a cracking game, and Norwich won 3-2 with a last minute winner from Robert Fleck. I actually watched that on telly. I didn't go to that, but yeah, incredible to think. I think Norwich actually did end up finishing about third that season, didn't they?
Yeah, they did do really well. And then also a few seasons previously, they'd won what was called the Milk Cup back then in 85.
Yes,
I
indeed.
think it was, beating Sunderland in the final 1-0. So yeah, Norwich City were on a bit of a charge during that period.
I'm a bit surprised you didn't choose that moment to reference the winners of the 1986 Milk Cup, Jamie. I don't know why you chose not to ignore that.
Well, I suppose it's fair, but yeah, it would have been Norwich winning the Milk Cup from the previous winners in 1984, which would have been Liverpool.
Who would have that been, Graham, in the 86?
Well, yes, 1986 winners was the Oxford United, of course. Glorious victory. So there we go. You mentioned Terry Hurlock, and Terry Hurlock is... So I'm going to think, if you ever get a list of football hard men, I think Terry Hurlock almost always appears in that list. Stu, was he sort of fearsome was he good to have in the side?
Yeah. Yeah. I remember I sort of winding back to earlier in the conversation, Jamie mentioned about the victory against Brentford that kept them in the third tier, and Hurlock played for Brentford that day. And, the crowd, the Millwall crowd just hated him. And he was a sort of player that if he played against you, you kind of, he was the devil incarnate. If he was on your side, he was absolutely brilliant. And he was. I mean, he was genuinely hard. You get hard players in inverted commas who kind of posture and do all this stuff. But Hurlock, could start a fight in an empty room. He was a hard case. There was some story about him tearing the dressing room door off in anger after a defeat once, and just a really, really solid player, but also a decent footballer. He actually won 3 England B caps when he was at Millwall, I think, and then he went on to play, of course, for Glasgow Rangers under the shy retiring Graham Souness. So.
Yeah, I wonder what Souness saw in him. Another one who was famed for his crazy hair and rough football.
Curly Barnet and a flagrant regard for the safety of his opponents.
A man whose approach to rescuing Liverpool's fortunes was to invest some money in David Speedie and Julian Dick.
Yes, and did he not sign Neil Ruddock?
I think he did sign Ruddock as well.
It also was a bit part player in the Millwall story, wasn't he? Razor Ruddock. He was quite a hard bugger as well. You have got hard players now, but the way the game has changed, hard means being, good at actually making proper tackles and stuff rather than just taking people out. I mean, sort of putting the Fulham hat on, João Palhinha, who sadly left Fulham in the close season. I mean, I've never seen anyone tackle like him. He was just superb. But he didn't foul a lot, but he was just great at winning the ball. Whereas, Terry Hurlock used to win the ball and the man and occasionally put the man into the, into row 3 just for good measure. And because the laws were slightly different, would quite frequently get away with it.
I think it's just typical of that particular time in English football, because it was commonplace. You already mentioned Julian Dix. I mean, Julian Dix was another level in my eyes from Terry Hurlock. You're right. I think Terry Hurlock could actually play a little bit. Julian Dix arguably was just physical presence on the pitch, that scary physical presence on the pitch. You mentioned, Neil Ruddock, who around that time. You had Vinnie Jones at Wimbledon, who again was a hard man, actually made a career out of being branded the hard man, and made a Hollywood career out of that as well. And also Steve McMahon at Liverpool, who was definitely part of that generation. And I think, Graham, was there a player, you'll know this, was it a forward, Billy Whitehurst? Can you remember? Was he
Billy Whitehurst?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember him, yeah.
Yeah, we had a spell with him, and Billy Whitehurst is a genuinely frightening player, I think. Just a brickie who ended up playing football, and total enforcer, absolute enforcer. Yeah. And I was reading Neil Ruddock tells the story. Who knew that? I was reading some Neil Ruddock's 25 hardest men. I expect there was a DVD back in the day that went with that.
Danny Baker, Danny Baker did a Hardman DVD, didn't
Yes,
he?
he
The
did.
aforementioned
Yes.
Danny Baker,
Yeah. And Ruddock tell the story of Billy Whitehurst. He didn't even get on. At half time, the team they were playing against, they just basically sent Billy Whitehurst over in his suit to have a word with Ruddock at half time. Even that is scary enough. Terry Hurlock and Stu, you mentioned this. There was an ability, I guess, for players of that era to be hard men, but not necessarily to get punished in the way you might think. So, Jamie, was Terry Hurlock a red card fiend?
Yeah, he got red cards, but I think he only received 7 red cards in his whole footballing career. I'm not sure how many he picked up for Millwall. Millwall definitely picked up red cards during this particular period, but how many of them were from Hurlock? I probably need to get Stu to help on that. But yeah, Hurlock only had 7 red cards, which in the grand scheme of things, in terms of players that received the most red cards, it's quite meagre actually. In fact, it's quite pathetic when you see against the footballer who's received the most red cards in the history of the game.
Who's that?
So there's a player from Colombia called Gerardo Bedoya, who in his footballing career, 21 years, has received 46 red cards.
Really?
Yeah. 46 red cards in a 21-year playing career. He played 4 internationals for Colombia and he got 1 red card. He also had a season where he was a coach for Santa Fe. And in his 1 season at Santa Fe, he received 11 red cards as a coach in a single season. I mean, he makes Hurlock look like a pussycat, really, doesn't he?
Yeah.
There's some going.
That's impressive stats, really.
I thought I assumed you were going to say Mark Dennis, but sadly not.
Funny enough, I lived briefly in Mitcham in the late 80s, and one Sunday morning I went to a local pub, and Mark Dennis was in there with some of his mates. And this was the day after he'd been sent off playing for QPR for essentially doing Aussie Ardiles. And it was all over the back page of the Mail on Sunday or whatever it was. And his mates were sort of goading him by showing him this picture and all this. And Dennis was going into details. I wish I'd done him proper, kind of can't believe I let him walk off the pitch. Because he was quite a nasty piece of work. I kept my head down. I thought I'm not going to get involved.
Definitely.
Mark Dennis's personal feud with Aussie Ardiles. That's
the guy who has surprisingly few red cards is Robbie Savage, isn't it? Who I think he only gets 1 throughout his career, which shows he's an unbelievable talent to push things as far as he can without overstepping the mark.
To a certain point. Yeah.
I wonder how many players have been sent off for actions received by Robbie Savage.
Yes.
I would suggest the number is greater than 1.
Yeah. The chain of events set in motion by Robbie Savage has ended up in other people's red cards. Yeah. Good question. But
definitely so.
I think back in the 70s and 80s and the early 90s, it was harder to receive red cards. The referees and officials are would let a lot more things slide. In fact, during this 88-89 season, there was an experiment by the BBC where they mic'd up the referee David Ellery, public high school teacher, and he refereed the game between Millwall and Arsenal in the league, I think it was, in which you can hear everything that was said. Now, Millwall and Arsenal both knew that Ellery was mic'd up, so they knew that Ellery was coming into this. He's on a documentary, but they knew he was mic'd up. But the Arsenal football team, the officials, forgot to tell the Arsenal players Ellery was mic'd up. So you've got the Millwall players on probably better behaviour than normal, Arsenal are just going about their business in the normal way. And there's one instance where there's a goal line scramble, and Steve, you might even remember the game, where it looks like the ball's gone over the line, but there's a melee of players on the goal line. The keeper's nowhere, and it's hard to see whether it's crossed the line or not. And Tony Adams is absolutely incensed. He's like, it's a goal, it's a goal. And as he's yelling at David Ellery, and the pitch of his voice is getting higher and higher and higher, he then calls Ellery, you effing cheat, which in my money is immediately a red card. But Ellery calls them over, and it's brilliant. I urge you to watch it. Tony Adams kind of slouches over, hands on his knees, and Ellery is like, now you stand up. So Tony Adams stands up, and he's like, you know, I will tolerate most things, but I won't tolerate that. And then Adams is like, well, I was frustrated. And he goes, yes, you can be frustrated, but there are other words you can use. I may be a lot of things, and we may not be good at our job, but we're not cheats. He sends him on his way. It's a fantastic bit of telling. But that's a red card these days. That's 100%. If you refer to any official in the sense that they are potentially cheated, that's an immediate red card, isn't it?
Definitely.
I don't know. I mean, you know, you still see officials getting loads and loads of abuse, don't you? And whether you know, is there a tipping point? You can, you know, swear and shout at them, but you can't call them a cheat. I don't know what where the line is drawn.
So at Millwall, they have a tremendous start, and actually they keep their momentum throughout the season, don't they? Or right up to, I mean, you talked about that kind of March point, and there is a sort of a tipping point, but they are going extraordinarily well in that season.
Yeah, I think up until March, they'd barely been out of the, you know, top 3 or 4, and with 10 games to play, they were actually in third place in the league, and then they actually failed to win any of their last 10 games, drawing 4 and losing 6, and ended up finishing in 10th place, which was the lowest place they've been all season. Difficult to sort of say what happened, whether teams had started sussing them out, whether they ran out of juice a bit. As we've already mentioned, they had a fairly thin squad, but that they, you know, so last 10 games they picked up a total of 4 points.
Having seen him play for Oxford briefly, I'd suggest starting Steve Antrobus might have been the cause of that problem in both the last 3 games.
Yeah, I hadn't picked up the Antrobus link with Oxford in fairness, but yeah, he did. I mean, he was very much a fringe player. I think maybe O'Callaghan had got injured towards the end of the season, and Antrobus came in, because certainly O'Callaghan was missing the whole of the following season, and I think he had picked up a quite serious injury. There were some warning signs there. Clearly, you know, 4 points out of 10 games is not good. Cascarino had failed to score in any of the last 10 games. They'd got hammered by Spurs 5-0 at home. They'd got hammered by Forest. So, you know, running out of juice, maybe running out of ideas, I don't know. But certainly it was disappointing to end the season in that fashion. But I think if you'd said to any Millwall fan at the beginning of the season, you're going to finish in 10th above Man United, they'd have snapped your hand off.
The losing couple of home games is quite significant, because playing the Den was clearly an advantage, or something. They did make it into a fortress. So Millwall win 10 home games that year. It's only bettered by Liverpool that season, I think. You know, I think it would be fair to say that Millwall thrived in thinking not necessarily the nicest place to come and visit as a visiting player.
The whole objective of the crowd was to make the opposition feel uncomfortable, particularly on, you know, sort of as the winter set in, because I don't know if any of you guys ever went to the old Den, but it was kind of, it was in a bit of a sort of depression in the land. So the mist used to kind of congregate, and you used to get this sort of mist swirling around, and the crowd would sort of do this low kind of moo noise. And and you could see the likes of, I can't remember who the Man United team of the day, maybe Brian McClare and Clayton Blackmore. There'd be an example. and not a man who fancied a cold night at the Den. And yeah, it definitely worked in their favour. It was an intimidating place to visit as an opposition player. Occasionally, it was quite an intimidating place to visit as a home supporter, actually. But,
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, to this day, we obviously have we are Millwall, no one likes us. There's almost they have sort of kind of dined out on that. That reputation, I guess.
I think that reputation, although there had been incidences of violence and stuff dating back to the 60s, I think there was a documentary, wasn't there, in 1978? And I can't remember for the life of me what it was called, but it basically followed the sort of Millwall halfway line squad, and you know, it was an expose of football violence and stuff. And I think that, you know, clearly Millwall identified with that image, and the fanzine was "No One Likes Us," and you know, the song is "No One Likes Us," and "No One Likes Us, we don't care." And you know, teams have an identity, and that was Millwall's, and I think still is to a lesser extent maybe these days, but you know, they definitely revel in it.
Because so Millwall making an appearance in the Premier top league as it is as a London club, their first appearance there, and they are far from the only London team in the division.
No, there's 7 London teams in the division, and then the following year, when Millwall play in their second season, in the 89-90 season, there are 8 London teams representing in the top tier, which is the most London teams that's ever been in the top tier of English football. 40% of the teams all came from the Greater London area.
Bonkers.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I mean, London does have a lot of football teams. It's quite incredible that London can produce so many football teams. There's not many cities in the world that produce. I think Buenos Aires comes to mind. I think they have a crazy amount, 17, 18 professional football teams. So there's not many cities in the world that have more professional football clubs than London, I don't think.
No, and I don't know whether that works as an advantage that you've got a lot of derbies, or whether that works as a disadvantage.
14 London derbies, you know, would have been in the season.
Yeah, and so, you know, I guess if you raise your game for the derby, then that's going to work in your favour, isn't it? Really. And I did look at the season when Millwall finished in the top 10. So their first season up, there were, as you say, 7 London clubs. So essentially, Millwall played in 6 or 12 London derbies, and fared not that well, in fairness. They beat Charlton home and away. They beat QPR home and away, and then they failed to win any of the other games. They drew one with Arsenal, but lost home and away to Spurs, Wimbledon, and West Ham. So one could argue that it didn't really work in their favour that season. And to be honest, the following season, though I haven't looked, they won so few games that I suspected didn't work in their favour that season either.
No, they didn't win a single London derby in that second season, and I think they've got 3 draws. They drew home and away with Wimbledon. They drew with Bolton Athletic, and they also drew with Crystal Palace, but they lost the rest of them.
Right. Yeah. Well, they only won 5 games in total that second season they were up. So,
and incredibly, 3 of those were in the first 5 games.
Well, yeah. Incredibly, again, they were top of the table after 5 matches, I think.
Yeah, that's right. They were up.
You know, and won 3 and drew 2 of the first 5 games, and then won 2 of the subsequent 33 matches. So clearly that was a blip rather than an upturn in fortune.
It really is. I mean, we talked about this Millwall side being something of a streaky team, and we've largely been viewing it in terms of being a positive streak. But yes, their last win in the league was at home to Aston Villa on the 16th of December.
Yeah.
And there's no further top flight victory after that. So it was pretty ignominious slide down the table.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, it's difficult to kind of pinpoint where it went wrong because the side was largely the same side as the previous season. I think I was mentioned that O'Callaghan got injured. But we had a guy that had been signed the previous season from Newcastle, Paul Stevenson, who was a capable replacement. But, you know, it looks in hindsight as though a lot of the players kind of peaked in that season and then were sort of just in their decline. So, you know, the likes of Steve Wood obviously went into a terminal decline that ended up with him playing for Oxford. Les Briley arguably past his best by that point. Brian Horn in goal had always been an adequate keeper, but I think when he left Millwall, he went on to play a number of games for Hartlepool. So that was the direction he was heading in. And I guess that, you know, when they were losing players, they weren't necessarily replacing them with the same quality. Cascarino left towards the end of that season. I think by that time the writing was on the wall, and John Docherty got sacked, I think, in February, and they replaced him with Bob Pearson as caretaker manager, and to add to his actual role at the club as janitor. So I think that kind of indicated that you know, Reg Burr had decided that maybe his experiment of chucking a load of money at it hadn't worked, and so the white flag was waved to a point. But then they appointed Rioch at the end of the season, and made a bit of a fist of trying to come back up again after that, in fairness.
I think what's quite interesting in that, as you say, they, under Bruce Rioch, who goes on to be another Millwall manager who takes over at Arsenal, they evolved the football style a little bit. And Sheringham, they, you know, quite wisely have worked out that Sheringham's quite a tasty player. And they sort of shape and build the side around him. And Sheringham has his best season for Millwall. I think he gets a crazy number of goals in that year.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly how many, but you know, I think he got in the 30s that season. And of course, he went on to be at that point Millwall's highest ever scorer, though he was subsequently overtaken by Neil Harris, who obviously is the current manager at Millwall. So, but yeah, I mean, kind of, you know, Rioch took over, as we said, changed the style, brought some new players in, mixed it up a bit, and they got to the playoffs the following season and lost to Brighton over 2 legs in the semi-final. And that kind of, I think, was the end of the remaining players from the top flight season. Sheringham obviously moved on to greater glory. He went on to Forest, then Spurs, then Man United, and however many England caps he won. Jimmy Carter left for Arsenal and Liverpool. Les Briley, I think, retired or went, you know, dropped down the divisions. Terry Hurlock had already gone. So the core of that team that had that success had kind of drifted, and then and I think Rioch wasn't at Millwall for long. I think he was only there for about a season, and he was replaced by Mick McCarthy. For
he was a player as well, you know. Was that Mick McCarthy's
Yeah, I think he started as player manager. He was signed as a player, and then he took over from Rioch as player manager. So
I think you are permanently equally cursed and blessed with McCarthy, aren't you? I think there's a certain level of achievement, and there's not much difference between the floor and the ceiling with McCarthy, probably. But as Ipswich, among others, have found it very well. Maybe Ipswich should argue it was the right decision now. He's often holding things together more than people might appreciate.
Do you know that Steve Coogan's playing Mick McCarthy in the film they're making this release next year called Saipan, which is about when the Republic of Ireland were in Japan for the 2002 World Cup and they have the big blow up, Mick McCarthy and Roy Keane. Steve Coogan is playing Mick McCarthy I can't think of any better casting. It's genius.
Bizarre. Yeah.
Doctor
I didn't know
Strangelove.
that.
Yeah, Doctor
Yeah.
Strangelove, Jimmy Savile,
From
Mick
Partridge,
McCarthy.
from Partridge to Savile to McCarthy. I mean,
It's
Teddy
a strange
Sheringham,
thing
by
to
the
make
way.
a film about, isn't it?
Yeah, but they're not. They did it, I guess. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. That's for sure. It may become my favorite football documentary after I've watched that. So who knows?
If they're going to make a film for a dodgy selection and poor training facilities at the World Cup, well, I mean, what next? We're gonna see Steve Coogan playing David Batty in the David Batty Graham Lasso punch up, or what moments of football minor trauma are going to get the Hollywood treatment.
I'm just going to fill in a gap. Teddy Sheringham scored 38 goals for Millwall in the season where they reached the playoffs, which is incredible. Obviously, Cascarino had moved on, as you mentioned, Stu, at that particular moment. Alex Ray was the next closest with 12, which just goes to show the qualities of Sheringham. He still was producing the same volume of goals that he was with Cascarino in those 3 or 4 seasons in that playoff season.
I suspect, as we've touched on already, the style of play that Millwall were playing then was maybe more geared towards Cascarino's strengths than Sheringham's. And then when he left, it then freed Sheringham up to kind of play, a slightly more sophisticated role. But from a team perspective, the most successful years were when the two of them were up front. So
I think the other thing that's interesting about both those players is, they'd achieved, a huge amount already at that stage with Millwall, but both go on to have extraordinary later careers. I mean, Cascarino, who has a couple of pretty disastrous moves to Villa and Southampton, and then slightly again, absolutely fascinating character as it turns out, Tony Cascarino, but not least the whole saga about his Irish roots. That is the film that should be made. Tony Cascarino and his eligibility for Ireland. But he goes on to play in France for very successfully, well into his late 30s. And Teddy Sheringham he's probably still playing now.
I've forgotten. Cascarino went to Marseille, didn't he, for a period? Yeah. Famously, he was originally bought by Gillingham for a set of tracksuits, wasn't he? That was the story. For St Paul's Grey or whoever he was playing for, Gillingham gave him a set of tracksuits in exchange for Cascarino. But I mean, he still writes in the papers, doesn't he? He seems to carve out a career as a correspondent. Whereas Sheringham seems to have gone to ground. I don't know what he does now. Probably just puts his feet up and relaxes and talks about the old days. One interesting thing I jotted down, which may have to be sort of, if it's interesting enough, inserted retrospectively. But the season Millwall went up, none of their players made it into the PFA divisional team that season. Given the fact that Cascarino and Sheringham scored, countless goals between them, and Hurlock intimidated every other player in the division. No Millwall players in that team at all.
We are Millwall. No one likes us, especially the opposition,
including the PFA. Yeah.
Do you think that has something to do with the ludicrously early voting that they do? Because I think especially back in those days, I think they probably had to postal vote it. And Millwall had something.
Yeah, could be.
In one of those last 10 games, so there's kind of, wait. I can't give it to anyone from Millwall. I can't put anyone Millwall because they're like bumming around in seventh.
Yeah, no, that could be a valid point.
I think it is. I think because the voting was done something ridiculous like February time, wasn't it? I mean, there's still almost a season left, or just less than half a season left. Yeah, that's a good shout. Yeah, I forgot all about
that. Tremendous fact. Well,
here's a fact that's not so tremendous. I can tell you that Millwall, in their 2 seasons in the top tier, it represents, because they were founded in 2021, it represents 2% of their existence in English football playing in the top tier. of the 65 teams playing in the top tier, only 5 teams have a lesser of a percentage. And it's not Oxford, and it certainly isn't Fulham.
What are the teams that have less than?
So, I mean, you can have a guess if you want. I think a couple of them might be obvious. They're in the Premier League era. They only had fleeting seasons. Graham should know one of them, I think. They just had one glorious season, not so glorious season in the Premier League.
Swindon, of course.
Yeah. So Swindon Town and
Barnsley.
Yeah. Barnsley.
Yeah, you've also got
Leyton Orient.
Leyton Orient. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That is a great
They had one
shout.
season up, didn't they, in the 60s? Yeah.
Yeah, they did. And Northampton are the other ones. So there's 5 teams that have spent less time in the top tier than Millwall.
Right, we should get to ranking this team. This 5%, not even 5%, 2% glorious period. Jamie, as a reminder, we have 5 categories of greatness, all-time greats, right at the top, true greats. In the middle category, touch of greatness, edge of greatness just below that, and blinkered greats. Jamie, where are you going to go with this Millwall side?
Well, I mean, I think there's an argument for this to be a touch of greatness in the context of the history of Millwall Football Club. It certainly is an exception to the historical rule. And we'd even touch on the famous Millwall fans. But I can't help but gravitate towards, and I feel really bad, the 5th tier in this one. And as Millwall have never been in the 5th tier, I think feels appropriate to maybe call this one out and start us off, and I'll probably be well deservedly proven wrong. Blinkered greats.
Blinkered greats. Oh, that's harsh. Stu, where would you go? Where would you go with this lot?
I'd go edge of greatness. I think there was enough about that team to make it a bit special. You know, we've gone on about the partnership up front, Cascarino and Sheringham, and I think that would stand comparison with a lot of other strike partnerships. I think in terms of fearsomeness, Hurlock and Briley in the middle. Again, they'd certainly strike the fear have got into a lot of other teams. O'Callaghan and Carter on the wings, you can't argue with that, really. Defensively, maybe not a lot of stars, but a lot of players that come through the ranks, and say 2 Millwall stalwarts in there, Keith Stevens and Alan McCleary. So I'd say edge of greatness is a fair assessment of this lot.
Yeah, I think you put a team with Sheringham and Cascarino up front, scoring, double figures across 3 seasons, 2 in the Premiership, or the top tier. Terry Hurlock's hair, just everything about them. I think yes. Right, there's no argument to be had. I think we say Millwall, 88-89, edge of greatness. I love that one. It's a great story. Go on, Jamie. So, I mean, I think Danny Baker is the only Millwall celebrity fan I can think of.
Well, we started this with Danny Baker in terms of celebrity football fans that Millwall have. But also, Gary Oldman and Daniel Day-Lewis apparently are regular visitors to the Den. And if you really want a treat and something tasty, then you can also maybe fancy catching Greg Wallace, he of MasterChef fame. That's the quartet: Baker, Wallace, Oldman, and Day-Lewis, the famous Millwall fans.
Who was the rail union guy?
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. So, he's Mick. It's too good.
I'm the picture.
There's a story. Mick Lynch. So
that's the fella. Yeah.
So I don't know if this is true. I read somewhere that Mick Lynch gave Terry Hurlock a job as a sort of favour.
That is very possible. Yeah. What kind of a job was it?
No, I did. Yes, it was in this way. So, yeah, somebody says, I'm told that he now works as an administrator at the Rail Maritime Transport Union at their Euston, UK HQ. That was supposedly, there is a suggestion that That's what Terry Hurlock is doing there.
Mick Lynch oiled the wheels for Terry. Good man. I've got another celebrity one. Rod Liddle, ex-Today programme editor and journalist in the Sunday Times and stuff. Yeah, he's a Millwall fan. I'm sure there are others. They just don't want it to become public knowledge, I guess. Gary Oldman is pretty cool, though.
Gary Oldman, I think you'd struggle to find a cool celebrity fan than Gary Oldman. That is right up there.
Yeah, it's pretty fantastic, isn't it?
He won the Oscar for Churchill, didn't he? Did he win that?
Yeah. Very physical change. He's brilliant in everything. From Leon the Professional in the early years, right through to Slow Horses that's playing at the moment, which is absolutely
superb, isn't it? In fact,
really
Daniel Day-Lewis won 3 leading actor Oscars. So there has to be a case for Millwall supporters having won more Oscars than any other team's supporters. Hugh Grant's never won an Oscar, has he?
No, comedy actors never win.
Meryl Streep famously most nominated, but I don't think she support. Who does she support? Meryl.
She's a massive Oxford fan. She's all over it. Yeah.
She's down the Kazam all the time.
Yeah. Boy, Meryl.
She passes in the supermarket car park. She likes to save her money.
The Oxford celebrity fans, of course, are Timmy Mallett, and Timmy Mallett successfully persuaded Michaela Strachan to come along to some games as well. So Timmy Mallett and Michaela Strachan currently. So yeah, always welcome, of course.
They're a strange couple, aren't they? Timmy Mallett and Michaela Strachan. I can't see them going down the pub together.
They were on. I think they were on TVAM back in the day, right at the start when Timmy Mallett made his. I think they worked together then.
Lifelong friends. He wasn't on the Really Wild show, wasn't he? I think Michaela Strachan was on that with Chris Packham and another guy called Terry that had really strange hair.
Terry Nutkins. Yeah.
Terry Nutkins.
Terry Nutkins.
Him. Yeah, he did. He had the widest of wide partings, didn't he?
And don't forget, you can join us every week for by far the greatest children's TV program podcast that we like to do. Next week, it's a screen test with Michael Rodd.
Michael Caine must have been a Millwall supporter. He's born in the Elephant and Castle, so surely.
Chelsea, apparently. Michael Caine is a Chelsea fan.
Who'd have thought it?
New money.
Mm.
They were the glamour club in the 70s, maybe. That was like the...
That's true, yeah.
The drawer. He was at the height of
Alan
his fame
Hudson,
then.
Peter Osgood.
Yeah.
In fact, the Italian job, the van they drive over has got Osgood is good written on the side, hasn't it?
Of course, that's a brilliant spot. Excellent. Okay, well, we should leave it here. Stu, thank you as ever for you are becoming our London correspondent.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Graham. Thanks, Jamie. Always great fun. Really, really enjoyed it. So thanks for inviting me again.
Excellent. Jamie, thank you. Thank you as ever.
Yeah, this has been an absolute pleasure. It always is with Stu. I mean, with all, I guess, with Stu's God brings so much life to great teams that would never even hit my list of teams that we should cover. This has been fantastic.
Definitely so. So, Jamie, yes, as you say, we're going to be doing the 1940s Torino side. We are also venturing not very far from Millwall to West Ham and the 1975 team, and we're going to be having that one coming up. Should be an interesting one. So stay tuned for those. You can catch us on our socials with any feedback or comments, and we'll see you next time.